I want you to focus on the kill times right now. We're going to be talking about how come these warriors all have such different kill times. Some of them are 2 minutes, some of them are 4.5 minutes, but they all are in the top 25. How's this possible? Why are they doing such similar DPS? We're going to be focusing on the top 5 warriors, and you're going to notice that they have a whole minute in kill time variation. Check this out. We just went from 2 minutes and 20 seconds to 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and yet they have nearly identical DPS. What's going on here? Why should you not be using a Mortal Strike spec in your run? Why would a Death Wish spec almost certainly increase your DPS? And how could you play like the dual wield warriors in these groups such that your DPS is not impacted by your raid team being less performant? Let's cover what these guys are doing and the unique aspects of Eranikus, which make it so it's very hard for two-handed builds to compete with dual wield Fury, especially if your raid team isn't world class. It's not really the obvious things you would imagine. No, because let's look at all these kill times side by side. You're gonna notice that there's a ton of variation here. And it's also not quite as simple as a 3 minute and 30-second fight getting 2 Death Wishes off, because one of the guys only cast 1, even though he had time to cast 2. I imagine this is because they're new to the fight and they weren't sure exactly what their kill pace would be. But check out these damage profiles. They're now all overlaid on each other. You can notice that warriors pop off on this fight relative to other classes, and that's going to make more sense in a moment too. But let's peek their gear. Now you're going to see that 3 of them actually went with a 2-hand spec, and I want to argue that you shouldn't do that. You should go with a dual wield Fury spec. And the middle guy here, he only got a single Death Wish off. Imagine if he got 2 of them. He probably would be the #1 in the world. And I wouldn't be too surprised if next week we see him or somebody else playing like this taking the #1 spot with a kill that is over 3 minutes long. Let's talk about some of the benefits of being a 2-handed spec. Your auto attack has a longer cast time, so you can spend more time away from the boss before you actually lower your uptime. You also get less heroic strikes off, and this means if you use the Blood Surge rune, you can spend a lot more time away from the boss before it actually costs you any slam procs. Interesting. Whereas this is not true with dual wield Fury, and when you can really just stick on target, usually dual wield Fury is going to be able to get more moves off. The only ability you're really missing out on if there's transitions in the fight where you can't cast stuff is Whirlwind when you're dual wield Fury. But you have to worry about your rend uptime, getting reset, casting Mortal Strikes, and also getting off the overpowers themselves when you're a 2-handed spec. And Eranikus has at least 2 times in the fight where you're forced to basically do nothing. But there's also times where you get CC'd yourself and you get forced to do nothing. As a Fury warrior, you'll miss out on some whirlwinds, but as an arms warrior, it can really suck to basically spend more time casting things like Rend and then miss procs for overpower and cast windows for Mortal Strike. But of course, these minor inconveniences don't really make it so that way you can't go a 2-handed spec. 3 of these top 5 guys are a 2-handed spec. I'm just talking about some inconveniences you'll be dealing with if you decide to be arms. And now, let's go check out, how many dead spots there are by seeing the timeline here. You're going to notice that there's going to be periods where they don't really get as many overpowers off, and this is because Eranikus is practically immune. So even if they actually have their rend still up, they're not really using overpower too much. They could try to get really tactical and put it up on other mobs and still be getting the overpowers, but it's kind of a lot to manage. Now we can start getting into where you can get extra value out of being a dual-wield warrior, and we can talk about Death Wish in particular. Now, when you're trying to think about CDs, imagine you had a fight that lasted 90 seconds, and for 30 seconds in the middle of the fight, the whole raid CC'd and you're unable to do any damage. Would it be fair to say that Death Wish is up for 33% of that fight when comparing it to another spec? Or would you instead say, hey, Death Wish is up for 50% of the time where I'm able to deal damage? These effects like Deep Slumber basically make it so you have higher effective uptime on your CDs. So no matter what your kill length is, you can effectively pretend that it's 40 seconds shorter, which is the same as juicing how much uptime you'd have on all of your CDs with long cooldowns. Now, Flagellation doesn't really benefit by this nearly as much, but Death Wish gets a really big boost in effective uptime from this downtime. This is the number 3 guy. He tried to do an early Death Wish, but it wasn't really early enough, and so he didn't get 2 of them off, yet he's still number 3. Now imagine if he did this like 1 second before the boss, or like 10 seconds, and then he got 50 something seconds in total of having Death Wish up. This guy is also in the top 5, and he basically did just that, and he got around 50 seconds of uptime on Death Wish. But there's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds where he was able to hit the boss. So the effective uptime was really high. We can see by running the sim that depending on the kill length, it's actually possible that a longer kill time gives you more DPS than a shorter kill time. You could imagine if you kill the boss at exactly 3 minutes, you get 1 Death Wish. But if it's 3 minutes and 30 seconds and you get 2 of them, it's pretty obvious how you could actually do more damage, right? Now, ideally, we would have ran this with having the Death Wish set to be in the execute phases for the 1 Death Wish sims. But that would require a lot more time and to show you a lot more sim runs, so instead I'm going to make it always get used on the start. This will just slightly impact the DPS of a player who is playing something like ARMS because it would be treating them as if they did Death Wish on full. But the difference isn't huge. And all these sim runs are going to be for a dual wield Fury build, so that way it's more apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. So we just added 30 seconds onto this fight, and we see the DPS went up because we basically doubled the effective uptime on Death Wish by appending an extra 30 seconds to a 3-minute boss fight. Nothing too miraculous, kind of makes sense that we do more damage. Let's see, does this still change when you put on all the world buffs and better consumes? Does it make it even more significant? Of course it would, because warriors scale at more than just linear amounts. As you get better stats, each additional stat point means more to your bottom line DPS. Same with percent damage multipliers. You're going to notice that the difference doubles when we go from the no world buffs to the world buffs, but the un-Death Wish bonus to DPS does not double. So that means that the percent advantage gained from doing the timing like this with a Death Wish and getting an extra one off, it becomes more significant as you get more here, which is how every effect under Warrior works, and it's the reason it's really hard to balance us. Now I'm just picking a few different kill times to see where this spike kind of lines up. And what you're going to notice is that adding 30 seconds onto a fight length that's 3 minutes, it makes you do about as much DPS as a 95-second kill length fight. Isn't that just super duper wacky? That a 95-second kill is really, really similar to a 210-second kill for uptime. On fights like this though, that's just absolutely charming to me, because what it means is that if your group isn't as good as other people's, hey, you can still do really, really crazy DPS. I think it's better if fight length isn't such a big factor in how much damage you do in a lot of respects, because it means you don't have to stress about your raid team nearly as much. So what you should do is try to predict your kill times and then determine when you should Death Wish. Don't just always do it in the execute phase. And when you're done with this video, click my other ones, because I love doing this autistic shit, but you gotta click the videos right there. Click it. Click it. Do it. Do it now.